Welcome back. Let's now welcome the second finalist, American University of Beirut.
Test. Okay.
Just a quick reminder for our team on stage right now. When there's 5 minutes left for your presentation, you'll hear a beep once, and when time is up, it'll be beep twice.
Can you please tell us when to
Yeah,
start?
Yes, you may start now.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are more than honored to be standing in front of you here today. We are the American University of Beirut. It's our first time competing, and we are proudly representing Lebanon. So let me share with you a story. I presume my lucky habit before doing anything in life is simply listening to music. So yes, you can say we reached the finals today because of that. And honestly, I was glad to know that other people do that. But the main difference is what we listen to. Honestly, I remember my first reaction when I first listened to Gangnam Style. I thought it was weird, simply weird. But lately, I figured out that weird is good. So weird can eventually be good. So today, similarly, the K-pop industry, and for many others, is considered weird. So today, the AUB consulting team, Jad, Hirag, Maya and I are going to present to you a strategy to turn the K-pop industry from the different weird to the good weird and eventually to the viral weird. So as you can see, the main issue for the day is how can the K-pop industry sustain its growth among the highlighted competitions and the current challenges. Our strategy is to defend and attack. Defend as in retain its current fan base, and attack as in acquire a diversified and a new fan base.
Now, it's very important to consider in our industry the external environment. So we have major players that guide the value chain along this industry. So first of all, of course, we have the talent, which shapes the industry. We have the entertainment company, which shapes the talent into something that other people can consume. And also we have the management company. And finally, the public, which is the most important one. It's the end consumer. Now, this looks a bit complicated, but actually it's very simple. So first of all, we have the audition part, where we identify the talent that we need to recruit. Then we have the training part, where we recruit and teach our talent. So first of all, they teach about choreography, vocals, writing, but also, and this is the competitive advantage of K-pop, they teach them about being globally marketable. So they teach them about languages, speech, etiquette and interaction on a global level to reach more audiences. Now the third step, it's deploy and debut. So here we have a lot of marketing efforts and distribution effort through social media and through more traditional platforms. Finally, we have the maintain aspect, which develops further the relationship that we build in the deploy and debut stage. Okay, now where does the strength of K-pop lie? So first of all, in the audition part, they are able to attract a wide pool of applicants. So they attracted 900 million applicants from 9 different countries. So that's very impressive. Also, in the training part, they have a really rigorous and constructive training of their talent. And finally, in the deploy and debut part and in the maintain part, they are able to create synergies, for example, with travel agencies to increase their market share and make their talent more known on the global level. And also, they teach artists to self-market themselves in the future so they can maintain their relationship with the audience and the public. Now, of course, we have to consider the external environment's opportunities and threats on the different levels. So on the audition level, we have, of course, it's a big opportunity that the talent is already globalized because we all know how to speak, most people know how to speak English, and we have a bigger pool of applicants who are eligible for our recruitment. And also, we have a threat, of course, which is the competition from other market players, which might steal talent from us, and it limits our talent recruitment. Now, the training, we have also some threats. So the ethical and legal issues, scrutiny and scandal, which is a weakness in K-pop, and also the fast and free flow of information. Now, in the deploy and maintain, we have, of course, a big opportunity, which is the increase in consumption of consumer electronics and the penetration of the internet, which makes it easier for us to market the celebrities. And also, we have some threats, so the liability of foreigners in non-Asian markets, and the artist's reputational risk, which might cause a bad word of mouth, and especially through the internet.
So according to our following analysis, we came up with three main alternatives. First, localization, and by that we mean customization for local markets. Second, we have leveraging the domestic success yet globally. And third, we have focusing on other Asian markets, which is also a potential alternative. Now, accordingly, we evaluated each of the three alternatives depending on the pros and cons. And as you can see, for localization, we decided that the pros is that it decreases the cultural gap, that is first. It also increases your customer base, and by that we mean the fan base. And in addition to that, it increases your brand exposure. However, the con is that it might be a bit time consuming. Now for the second alternative, the pro is that it maintains the K-pop identity, and this is something quite important. In addition to that, it is quite time efficient. The con is that the K-pop might be facing some cultural resistance from different cultures in different countries. Now, for the third alternative, which is focusing on other Asian markets, the pro is that there is usually a low cultural gap among Asian markets. Of course, that cannot be forgotten about. However, the cultural gap is a bit lower than other countries. In addition to that, it is also time efficient. Now, the con is that we might have limited growth if we go with that alternative. So accordingly, as you can see, since the first alternative has the most pros and relatively the same cons, we decided to go for that. So localization. Where to? The first question is where to go to. We have several options. However, we decided to focus on Japan, USA, and China. Japan simply because we have a large existing fan base there, in addition to the fact that we need to mitigate the anti-Hallyu wave that is resisting the K-pop industry. China, since you already entered China and there's a need to develop that in order to eventually capture your fan base. After that, we also assume that there is a low cultural gap. However, for the third option, which is USA, we simply believe that there's a dominant music industry there and there's plenty room for growth. So accordingly, to attain the localization strategy, we decided to go for a 3D strategy focusing on three main pillars, which are brand exposure, one, performer satisfaction, and in addition to expanding the industry offerings. So going to the first pillar, which is brand exposure. We decided that it would be best to recruit the localized talents in a way that the team would be gathered from a localized market and they would be specialized in that market. In addition to that, we decided to adapt to the local customs, local preferences, local needs, however, without changing the K-pop identity. So that would also include partnering with local music producers and online music libraries such as Pandora. So if we want to partner, what we actually want is the local knowledge, the local expertise, and of course the local fan base. What we can offer is the access to Korean markets and of course the diversifying fan base for the partners. Of course, this would achieve new revenue stream for both. Your turn. So after achieving the partnership, which would increase the market share and would help us access new markets, this would allow us to offer K-pop package tours, which would allow the customer to have accessibility to different markets whereby the K-pop industry is strong, and assumingly there are different competitions or different concerts that are related to the K-pop industry. So for the performance satisfaction, which is an important pillar since the performer is going to lead to the success of the K-pop industry, we assume that for the current and for the future performers, we decided to provide a career path, as in guaranteeing certain experiences for the performer and after performing career. So they would think that when their performance career ends, then their career would end. However, you would show them a guarantee that no, they can pursue a career in production or in other things. So in addition to that, we would like you to offer a guaranteed performance debut. So even those who you do not think would eventually become stars, it would be preferable if you offer them debuts for opening acts for local or bands or for small acts, and this would help you also ensure a more satisfaction level, and that can happen through moral support and through adequate recognition. So as you can see, there's a line of dissatisfied, not dissatisfied, not satisfied, and satisfied. So if you do not offer them moral support and recognition, they would be somewhere over there. However, for you to reach the satisfied level of the performer, it is better to offer them, in addition to the financial support, a moral support and an adequate recognition in order to reach the satisfied part.
Now, the next step that I want to talk to you is about improving your efforts with prospective talent. Now, this has one main issue, which is a summer camp that is designed to allow for the youth who wish to audition to be K-pop performers to get a taste of the life before they have to experience it and sign a contract. What this means is that the youth aged between 4 and 8 and 12 to and 8 to 14 have the chance to explore and engage in K-pop culture as performers before they are forced to sign a contract. So this offers them a chance to engage, have fun, but also to see the difficulties of K-pop culture, where they're forced to learn a new language, when they're forced to learn about etiquette. Now, the second dimension is that we want you to offer a new growth into the industry. This growth will be based on growing the industry not just in music and music videos, but also about growing into musical theater. Now, musical theater is a very interesting segment because as the K-pop industry, you already have all of the basis for it. You have designers, artists, choreographers, everything required to hold a successful musical theater piece. Now, the growth of this industry is based on the successful integration of existing artists who are already leaders in the K-pop industry. By focusing on K-pop artists who have already undergone training for extensive years and already have a large fan base, you'll be able to collaborate with them and introduce them to a new market similar to the K-drama industry. What this does is it diversifies the industry and opens you up to a new fan base and a new user base that are able to experience K-pop in a different manner in which they might enjoy it more than just listening to music and watching the music videos. This will also increase tourism to South Korea, and after a year of performing the play, they will then be broadcast on Netflix, etc., to have a global recognition of the musical industry. Now, I'm going to tell you a bit about the timeline involved. In the first 6 months, we'll be increasing the recruitment in Japan, China, and the USA. And the issue is that we want to increase recruitment by focusing on existing artists, so that they don't have to undergo 7 years of training. So that after a year of intensive K-pop training, they'll be able to focus on providing the ultimate K-pop experience. And within 1 year of recruiting them, they'll be able to begin performances. So we suggested focusing on Japan first to mitigate the anti-Hallyu movement, and then focusing on China to strengthen your existing roots, and having a long recruitment process in the USA to then begin to develop a greater idea of what the US mitigation for their different cultural gaps are. Afterwards, there's the contract changes to allow for performers to feel satisfied with their lifestyle, as well as the summer camp and musical theater, following finally with the broadcasting of musical theater across the globe. Now my colleague Hrog will walk you through the financial aspect.
So first of all, just to clarify some basic industry assumptions. So the sales growth, the compounded annual growth for the industry is 8 to 12%, and the data was based on the top 3 players, which we assumed constitute 40% based on sales. And the main revenue streams in the industry are views on YouTube, merchandise, and music and ticket sales. So some assumptions for revenue, since the industry made 3.4 billion in the first half of 2012, we assume that in the second half of 2012 they'll make a bit more due to New Year concerts and summer vacations. So that would be a total of $7 billion. Go. And our main assumption was that those three revenue streams, they are divided as to the following way. 70% of revenue comes from music and ticket sales, 10% from YouTube views, and 20% from merchandise. And of course, each one has its own profit margin, the highest being merchandise due to textile and fabric, and it's much easier to produce in big volume and achieve mass globalization. So as my colleague had mentioned, in the timeline, the revenue will kick in gradually in each country. So in addition to revenue that you will make, some additional revenues will kick in 2016 as follows. So in the first quarter, the revenue in Japan will kick in an additional revenue due to more concerts and more music being sold there. In the second half of 2016, the revenue will start kicking in China for, of course, ticket sales and concerts. And the musical theater, the new musical theater aspect that we suggested will kick in, first of all, in South Korea, just to test the market, see how it goes. And in the third quarter of 2016, more revenue will enter from the US due to, again, more views on YouTube, more merchandise. That will come from extra concerts and ticket sales that will generate more revenue. In 2017, in the second quarter, we'll start broadcasting, and as my colleague Jad mentioned, mainly on Netflix, which of course we all know has approximately 200 to 300 million users, and they're very active. So that will help us generate a bigger user base. And of course, all those countries, they will contribute to existing revenue, and of course, and the new musical theater and broadcasting musical theater are part of new revenue streams that we suggested to, let's say, mitigate the potential saturation in the ticket sales and revenue sales. So the result, how is it going to affect us? First of all, without our strategy, we still maintain our belief that the industry is growing, but the growth is decelerating. So from 2012 to 14, the growth was approximately 10%, but our data indicates that by 2018, the growth will decrease to 5%, and the profit margin, which is a key issue in this industry because some players were, let's say, suffering from losses lately, and the profit margin will decrease to 2 to 3%. But our data indicates that based on our strategy, our revenue, the new revenue contribution, that small little red cloud, cute cloud that you see, is the additional revenue that will kick in, like we just mentioned, in 2016 in the first quarter in Japan, then in China, then in the US. And as the data indicates, the growth will reignite, and the data indicates that it will be approximately high single digits to low mid digits. And since the merchandise is, let's say, more likely a high margin business, due to the average selling price of clothes, which tend to be high compared to their cost, as well as the broadcasting, which doesn't take much because it would be a partnership with Netflix. We believe that the profit margin as well will increase eventually. So to show you our result, the black line is the industry without a strategy, what would it be like in 2018, and the red line is our strategy, what would it be like. You can see, of course, the difference is not humongous because we want it to be realistic, and since the musical theater thing is completely new, we want it to be conservative and realistic. So the difference is approximately 2 billion in revenue, and since we assumed the profit margin with our industry would be approximately 5 to 6% as opposed to 2 to 3, so that's an additional profit of 100 million in revenues for the entire industry.
Now, of course, no strategy comes without risk, and especially in the music industry because it's based on humans, and humans make mistakes. So the first risk is the reputational risk of artists, which might affect a lot K-pop. So to mitigate that, we would conduct thorough training on ethical issues, especially, for example, drug abuse or other. Now, the second risk is political tensions with the targeted countries. So that is a special risk in every global company, and we would mitigate that by redirecting the strategy to other safer markets with which we have good relationships.
So in conclusion, we believe that the K-pop industry is a potential industry to invest in, and it has plenty of room for growth. And trust me, I mean, in Lebanon, they listen to K-pop, and that's pretty far-fetched. So we believe the opportunities multiply once seized, and this is a great opportunity to seize. We are now open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. May we now pass it to the judges for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On the training, and I guess a core part of what you're proposing is the integration for localization. Where would the training take place? Locally or in Korea? And I guess a follow-on from that is, if it's locally and you're creating a local K-pop or world pop, then how do you think regulation will impact the business?
The strategy was to have it integrated in Korea due to the fact that the K-pop artists have to interact with each other on a daily basis. They have to live a lifestyle of a communal aspect in which they get to bond and interact with each other on a daily basis. This helps them to establish fluency in other languages, as well as establishing a more acclimated sense of other cultures and differences that might take place due to having different people from different nations taking part in the K-pop industry. So an individual who is recruited from Japan will then be able to convey those differences to an individual from Korea, which will help us narrow the cultural gap that we're currently experiencing.
Okay, understood. How easy do you think it's going to be to recruit from other countries under the same conditions that performers are recruited in Korea?
Currently, and we already are getting, like as in the K-pop industry, it's getting a lot of applications worldwide, globally, not only from South Korean people or from Korean people, which shows the room for actually recruiting people from different countries, from different cultures. And this would eventually allow you to set certain standards for all the recruiters, for all the recruitees to follow. And eventually this would allow you know what to prioritize and on what basis to choose your potential star, regardless of which country they come from. So the applications are there. You are getting applicants from different countries. However, the basis of picking or choosing your star is going to be based on certain standards that are standard to everyone.
I noticed that what you were talking about in terms of your geographical reach was Japan, China, and the USA, but you didn't seem to be talking about the rest of Asia before hitting the USA. Could you explain your reasoning there for that?
Our focus on the USA was due to the fact that it's such a large market and it's able to shift the focus of other countries to match its trends and musical preferences. If you go to any country in the world, one of the most common songs you listen to in any club, pub, or nightlife scene, and as well as on the radio, is the musical industry that takes place in the US. So by focusing our efforts on the US, we're hoping to break into a more global strategy from the US as opposed to focusing on Asia to break into the globalized strategy.
So my question, I just want to understand a little bit more about this, your ideas about protecting the underage. Okay, the training contracts, the reputational risk, it's all joined up, right? So then, you know, like the underage contract, clearly the training would take away the time from their proper education, losing the ability to choose when they grow up. Okay, so I'm not quite clear about your way of dealing with the underage issue, which is one of the issues of this K-pop industry, that could, cause them a problem, right? So can you just elaborate your point again? So how do you, deal with that problem again?
The idea about the summer camp isn't to have a day camp for individuals to come. It's to have an intensive summer camp that simulates, not fully, but does simulate the effect of lifestyle in the K-pop industry to the individual who is performing. So a 2-month stay in the summer will include staying at the summer camp overnight. It will have you living with other residents, and it will get you immersed in the idea of what a K-pop lifestyle would be like. At the same time, we would have advisors from the K-pop industry who themselves are performers to talk to the children, which will allow them to have a one-on-one experience with other performers. This will allow them to decide for themselves as an individual whether or not they want to continue and follow a similar lifestyle. And they won't only be interviewing the successful K-pop stars, but they'll be able to talk to the successful ones and the ones who got stuck in the training program. And we will have a signed agreement by the kid in isolation without being able to have their parents enforce this on them, whether or not they don't want to pursue this. So their parents won't be able to obligate them to pursue a life in the K-pop industry.
Yeah, but then if you do that, you're throwing the decision to a young guy, which you're assuming that they have ability to decide, right? So then they need, so like when I was young, I think I know everything too, to be honest. Yeah, so I'm not sure. When I grow up, I realize most of the times I was wrong, but that's a growing process.
We're not putting the decision solely on the child, but we're putting the child in a position to say that they don't want to pursue this. Because if a child knows that he doesn't want to pursue something, and then he is forced into it because of parents or an environment that he feels pressured into it, then that's something that will eventually lead to a performer who will not be able to perform in the long run. So it will be an investment that's wasted. So by giving the child the power to veto the decision to go into the industry, then we're ensuring that the child, any child who does want to go into the industry, is able to continue and have a successful lifestyle with us.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, there will be a moment where there will be some groups of children who might like it in the beginning and then end up regret about it. Is there an option for them to get out?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so then there might be people who join the summer classes and buy in everything that you present. Okay, you talk to the successful guys and unsuccessful guys, things like that. So on day one, okay, they like it. Okay, they sign off, so they're very happy. But there's a lot of experience in life where you think you were choosing the right thing. At the end, you were wrong. So then my question is, in your strategy, have you thought about any like a, in a contract basis or something, that will protect the kids when they make a wrong decision? I'm not too worried about the guys who make the right decision. When we talk about the risk, we talk about the wrong one. Okay, if they were wrong, how did they get out from the system, from your perspective, from your like a framework?
Well, honestly, the risk of not liking something does not really depend on age. I mean, I'm in business now, and I cannot guarantee that in 10 years I would like to stay in business. So we cannot remove or mitigate that risk. But however, we are offering a more flexible strategy in order to know, if you want, negotiate the terms with the parents and with the children as well. And by that we mean to take the preferences and, if you want, the output of the experience from the child and how it went for him. But of course, that does not leave us with a guaranteed pool of children that are going to be sustained and that are going to stay with us forever, because there's always a turnover rate for several reasons, not only because of preference.
To build on what my colleague said, one issue that we believed would be somewhat successful is to allow for, in the contract, a 1-year period in which the children can back out if they don't like the lifestyle on a longer basis. So a child might like the summer camp for 2 months, but then after signing the agreement, they might not like it for 1 year. The problem with this mitigation is convincing the production houses that it is feasible. And we believe it is feasible because the loss of investment of a 7-year training program for all of their children that they are forcing the contract onto will be a lot greater than the loss of an investment on 1 year of training program for the youngest children.
Actually, I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot of potential performers lining up for these contracts. I suspect they'd sign whatever contract was in front of them. On the principle of introducing localization, I think it sounds attractive, but I wonder if that you're actually diluting what K-pop is. What do you think K-pop, how do you think it's succeeded so far? And how would you guard against diluting it?
One aspect of ensuring that we wouldn't dilute it is ensuring that all of the performers do realize that it is the K-pop industry that they're performing in, not a localized industry. So while the songs might be translated to Japanese or English, all of the dance moves, all of the choreographies will be based in Korean culture. However, there is room for some change to allow for large cultural gaps. However, the restriction on those changes won't be left to the choreographers, won't be left to the performers to decide, and they won't be left to the partners to decide. It will be left to the choreographers who do understand what K-pop is. It will be left to the songwriters who do understand what the industry is themselves. They will be the ones who believe that K-pop is what it is. And if the K-pop culture decides that it needs to shift, then that's where it's going to be, whether or not it's on a localized strategy or not. Because every music industry, every genre of any art does change on its own.
Okay. Well, I guess along similar lines, and forgive me if my prejudices come through here, but to me, K-pop looks as though it relies a lot on the cutesy aspect of it, which goes down well in Korea, Japan, and China. And I think their only issues with those two markets, as far as I can see, is that politically there could be some impacts. So how does that cutesy aspect translate in Beirut or anywhere else? What is it that attracts somebody in Beirut to K-pop?
Now, all markets everywhere are becoming more accustomed to global taste. Our taste worldwide are being globalized. We are tending to all like the same things. So when I first came here, I had so many things to talk about with people who live far away from my country. So we think that it's not that big of a problem because the world are shifting towards a unified taste. And we think that K-pop is in the right direction to accommodate that taste.
Could I ask you on one of your slides where you were talking about guaranteed career options, which sounded like a very expensive endeavor. But at the bottom of the slide, you said something very fascinating. You said a whistleblower program, but I don't think any of you spoke to that. What did you mean by that?
Actually, the Whistleblower Program is going to be part of internally controlling how the operations are going and how you are really managing the K-pop industry as a whole. So for every company that is engaging in the K-pop industry, it's quite important to have a whistleblower in order to eventually... I thought the slide was on. So to eventually, if you remember, we had a line of dissatisfaction and satisfaction. So we stressed on the fact that satisfaction does not only come from financial support, but also from moral from moral and adequate recognition. So the whistleblower is part of internally controlling and internally having a communication channel between the performer and the management of how things are going and if there is anything that is out of their control or if that is dissatisfying them in order to eventually reach a satisfied performer, and that would eventually lead to more growth, more revenue, and more success. So.
If I may add on to my colleague, the whistleblowing's importance is to prevent the news of going in the global world, especially now with the social media, the internet, the strong word of mouth. So we think that to mitigate a really destructive reputational risk, we can mitigate it internally by installing a whistleblowing program that will make us aware of any ethical or legal problems internally and solve them before it goes out to the world.
Well, if you're talking about 8 to 14-year-olds who don't have the ability to contract under law, I presume what you're really talking about is making sure that these people have legal representation, which of course is a huge business in the entertainment world. But I haven't heard you really mention that. A whistleblower program sounds a bit too much like something that we don't like. wouldn't you want these people to have proper legal representation and
Yeah, but I also want to add to your point, which is what I'm trying to just chase the time and just try to throw out my point as well. You know, if your model is based on whether the kid likes it or not, then they don't really need a contract, in my opinion. Right? I need a contract. If you like it, you go then, right?
The contract isn't based on whether or not the kid likes it. Whether or not the kid likes it is just to ensure that they will be willing and be able to perform at their fullest as a performer. No one is able to perform as a performer if they don't like what they're doing. The added value of this is that the children are able to guarantee that they will enjoy the industry. Now, the Whistleblower Program is not necessarily a whistleblower program in the legal sense. There is the legal aspect to it, but it's also about having a counselor and a guidance program that is able to advise the children about whether or not what they're doing is what they want, whether or not they're enjoying what they have signed themselves up for the first
so
year.
what you're talking about is an advisor to the child and the parents.
Can I
Unfortunately,
answer it?
it's the end of your session. Thank you very much. Please have a seat.